Chapter 1, I Want to Join In. The busiest area of Riverfield, it was nearly 4 in the morning, and even the vibrant nightlife of singing and revelry had gradually quieted down. Looking into the distance, rows of buildings were shrouded in darkness, with only one window on the middle floor of a ship-shaped hotel faintly glowing with a soft yellow light. Sophia Lewis stood outside the room, clutching her wildly beating heart, her mind in turmoil. It was rare for Ethan Tanner to visit a bar for relaxation. She had bribed the server to spike a glass of red wine with a substance and deliver it to his private room. Then, she secretly followed Ethan Tanner's subordinates, witnessing him being brought into this very room. Luckily, the door was still ajar. Surely, this was heaven's way of blessing her, understanding her intentions. Ethan Tanner, the man she had loved for 10 years. The thought of letting him go made Sophia Lewis's heart ache unbearably. But she was exhausted. Or perhaps, to put it more accurately, she no longer had the confidence to compete with the woman he loved. Because Ethan Tanner's feelings for Diana Sanders were something she understood better than anyone else. Whatever movie Diana starred in, he would invest in it. Even when box office returns were poor, he would pour money into promotions. When she was in a bad mood and went abroad to study, he foolishly waited for her. For her, the renowned CEO of CG Corporation had nearly thrown away all his dignity. Yet that woman didn't appreciate it at all. Not only did she fail to reciprocate Ethan Tanner's feelings, but she also recklessly indulged in the support he gave her. Why? Sophia felt it was so unworthy for him. So, she had tried every possible way to seduce him, using every method to divert his attention. But in the end, she still couldn't compete with the gentle words of that beautiful woman, "I'm back." In 3 days, Diana Sanders would return to Riverfield. Ethan Tanner would undoubtedly clear away all the women hovering around him, including her. If she couldn't have his heart, at the very least, she wanted to have him just once. Otherwise, she would never be at peace. After sleeping with him, she would completely let go. This was her final act of defiance. Taking a deep breath, Sophia Lewis bent down and pushed open the door. The lighting in the room was very dim, so dim that she couldn't clearly see the furniture inside. Her gaze landed on the bed. Sophia Lewis squinted, trying to make out the situation. Though she had always been bold, when it came to matters between a man and a woman, she was utterly inexperienced. Now that she was here, where should she start? As she hesitated, a hand suddenly reached out from the darkness and pulled her in. The scorching lips immediately silenced Sophia Lewis's startled cry, the fragile fabric easily slipped off, leaving her body cold. The earlier hesitation instantly faded when she caught the familiar scent of the man. It's him. The corners of her lips curled slightly as Sophia Lewis wrapped her arms around the man's neck, trying to relax herself. At the moment of spreading her wings to become a butterfly, Sophia Lewis unconsciously gripped the man's shoulders tightly. She had read plenty of information online, knowing that a woman's first time would be painful. Though she had mentally prepared herself, when the moment arrived, she couldn't help but flinch. "Be good, don't be afraid." The man's deep, husky voice carried an irresistible allure. Just 3 short words left Sophia Lewis utterly captivated. Could it be that she was under some sort of spell? She wondered. Though trembling in pain, she tried her best to endure without making a sound. The two were entangled in passion, lost in a whirlwind of desire through the late night. By dawn, Sophia Lewis struggled to sit up, glancing at the man sleeping soundly beside her. A gentle smile unknowingly appeared on her lips. His finely chiseled features seemed sculpted by divine hands. Even with his eyes closed, he exuded a noble and cold aura that kept others at a distance. Why couldn't she get enough of looking at him? Sophia Lewis felt a pang in her heart, forcing herself to resist the urge to caress the man's face. She didn't know how long the effects of the drug would last, nor did she dare to imagine how furious he would be upon waking. But for her, none of that mattered anymore. Her entire body ached as if she had been run over by a steamroller. Normally, even a small stumble would bring her to tears, but now, Sophia Lewis gritted her teeth, forcing herself not to make a single sound. After quietly getting dressed, she sneaked out of the room like a thief. Unbeknownst to her, the moment she closed the door, the man suddenly opened his eyes, the corners of his lips lifting slightly. 4 years later. Nathan Tanner, why did you argue with the customer? Sophia Lewis rubbed her chest, but the real pain was in her head. It's her fault. She thought I was easy to bully because I'm small. She claimed to be 28 but insisted she was 24. She couldn't even do the math right and blamed me for it. Nathan Tanner puffed his cheeks, looking indignant. Thanks to Nathan Tanner, she gained and lost in equal measure. When she first opened this small noodle shop, she had used the gimmick of a child cashier to attract customers. But now, the novelty had worn off, and people started causing trouble. You usually ignore things like that. Why did you act like you'd eaten explosives today? Sophia Lewis grumbled. Humph, it's because she kept asking where my dad was. So annoying. Nathan Tanner crossed his arms, speaking boldly. His figure was less than a meter tall, so wherever he stood, he looked tiny. Don't be fooled by the usual wide grin on his face. When he got angry, his eyebrows furrowed, and an air of coldness naturally emanated from him. This little boy, Nathan Tanner, had quite the character. If he disliked someone, he would absolutely refuse to serve them. Sophia Lewis suddenly felt a tightness in her chest. She couldn't understand how a child barely over 3 years old could speak so maturely, leaving her, as a mother, with no sense of authority. Seeing Sophia Lewis remain silent, Nathan Tanner sighed, quickly climbed onto a chair, and wrapped his soft, lotus-like arms around her neck. Mom, don't be mad at me anymore, okay? Nathan Tanner pouted, his sweet, coquettish voice capable of melting anyone's heart. Even the most resolute of hearts would have trouble staying stern. Sophia Lewis reluctantly smiled, all right, go play now. Nathan Tanner swiftly slid down from the chair and happily ran outside. Today, he didn't head to the small playground across the street to play on the slide but instead made his way straight to the luxurious shopping mall nearby. At that moment, the first floor of the mall was bustling with a children's model audition event for a fashion brand. He had done his homework, just making it into the top 3 would guarantee a prize of at least 10,000 yuan. That amount of money was equivalent to 2 months' profit from their small noodle shop. With his looks, securing a spot in the top 3 shouldn't be difficult. However, what the little boy didn't anticipate was that the very first step in his marathon journey would stumble at the registration process. Sweetie, you need a parent with you to register. The 2 beautiful ladies at the registration desk explained to Nathan Tanner with a smile. They tried hard to resist the urge to pinch his adorable cheeks. This little boy was simply too precious. Chapter 2, Your Leader is a Villain. Thick, long eyebrows, beautiful phoenix-shaped eyes, black pupils as vivid as black obsidian, and skin so fair and smooth it seemed to glow. Especially when he smiled, his rosy, petite lips were adorned with 2 charming dimples. If they weren't on duty, they would surely find a spot to pamper this adorable little boy to their heart's content. Really? Nathan Tanner's bright starry eyes dimmed with disappointment, a thin layer of mist clouding them. Sweetheart, you can call your parents, and then you'll be able to register. Seeing the boy on the verge of tears made their hearts ache as if their own were being squeezed. But I don't have a dad. As he spoke, tears streamed down his cheeks. My mom works so hard raising me alone. She's busy working, and I don't want to distract her. Miss, can't you help me? Nathan Tanner sobbed softly, like a fallen angel, breaking the hearts of everyone who saw him. The beautiful women were nearly driven mad. This overwhelming guilt, they couldn't bear it. Unfortunately, rules were rules, and this was the decision of their superior. Miss, I know this is hard for you too. Could I call your leader instead? His tear-filled, clear eyes carried a look of both pleading and innocence, making it impossible to refuse. What could they do? They were utterly desperate. Who could resist such an adorable little angel? Risking disciplinary action, they gritted their teeth and called the head of the competition. At that moment, their head of the competition was bowing his head, obediently accepting punishment. President Tanner, this time it really was my fault. Oliver Grant stood upright, his posture as rigid as a statue. For someone like him, a former soldier for many years, standing punishment was nothing. However, what made him uneasy was the calm demeanor of his boss at that moment. Having followed Ethan Tanner for many years, he knew his boss's temperament like the back of his hand. This kind of calm always signaled something ominous, if not death, then at least being skinned alive. And it served him right. Who told him to have such a loose tongue, blurting out something as foolish as, "Hasn't she already gotten married?" That had made Ethan Tanner furious, dumping a pile of trivial tasks on him, including managing a tiny children's fashion brand under the company, leaving him utterly exhausted. As if that wasn't enough, he even mistook someone's identity, causing his boss to get his hopes up for nothing. 2 offenses combined were enough to send him to the 18th level of hell. The man sitting on the black leather swivel chair remained silent, not even bothering to turn his head to glance at him. President Tanner, I still have 2 more leads. The documents have been printed, I'll go grab them right away. With that, Oliver Grant dashed out like lightning. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. At that moment, the phone on the desk rang. The man finally moved slightly and turned around. A flawless, exquisite face that left no room for criticism now exuded a cold, icy aura like the king of hell. The phone belonged to Oliver Grant, who had accidentally left it behind. Ethan Tanner wasn't supposed to answer it, but for some inexplicable reason, he reached out, picked up the phone, and pressed the answer button. Speak. What's the matter? His deep voice, mixed with a signature coldness, sent chills down one's spine. Hello, is this the Commander-in-Chief of the Dong Mo competition? A clear, childlike voice responded to Ethan Tanner. A child? He raised an eyebrow. I want to register for this competition, but I don't have my guardian's signature. Sir Commander-in-Chief, could you make an exception for me, please? Every sentence began with, Sir Commander-in-Chief, sounding so pleasant that it seemed to dissolve all the day's pressure. However, Ethan Tanner didn't lose his composure and even felt a bit annoyed. What kind of work ethic do his subordinates have? Calling about such trivial matters. Could you please take pity on me? I don't have a father, my grandmother is paralyzed, and only my mother works hard to support the family. Could you help me fulfill this small wish? The child's voice, tender yet full of enthusiasm and honesty, was so straightforward that it was impossible to dislike. Such an unfortunate childhood. Even someone as cold-hearted as Ethan Tanner couldn't help but be surprised. How old are you? For some reason, his voice softened. 3 years and 2 months old. Sir, your voice is so nice. The boy sounded delighted. So young yet so articulate and bold, calling him a prodigy wouldn't be an exaggeration. Sir, you must be very handsome. I've heard people say that handsome men always have a kind heart. I've always wished to have a handsome dad. After finishing his sentence, little Nathan Tanner burst into cheerful laughter. That crisp, clear laughter softened Ethan Tanner's stone-cold heart. He couldn't help but want to continue talking to the child. Little one, our competition requires a guardian, that's the rule. Saying this, Ethan Tanner suddenly felt a bit reluctant. You're also very handsome, very fitting for your brand. Ethan Tanner's firm tone made Nathan Tanner a bit flustered. Uncle, wait a moment. I'll send you a photo right away. Then, chaotic noises came from the other end of the line. Ethan Tanner frowned slightly, unusually refraining from hanging up. He was genuinely curious about what the boy, who had managed to gain his favor through just one phone call, looked like. Soon, the MMS notification sound chimed. Ethan Tanner opened the screen, glanced casually, and his deep eyes suddenly froze. 3 years and 2 months old, 4 years. Thinking of this possibility, Ethan Tanner's breathing became rapid. He immediately grabbed his phone, almost shouting, "Tell me, what's your mother's name?" Happily awaiting a response, Nathan Tanner was suddenly startled by the outburst. He pouted and hung up impolitely. "Humph, if you don't want to do it, fine. Why be so fierce? Made me waste all my effort acting cute just now. Sis, your boss is a bad guy." After saying this, Nathan Tanner turned and ran off. Joining the competition was a minor matter, revealing his mother's name was the bigger issue. Nathan Tanner's mother had repeatedly reminded him to keep the name, Sophia Lewis, a secret. He wasn't foolish, he knew what should and shouldn't be done. If his mother committed an illegal act, as her son, wouldn't he have to shoulder the burden for her? Despite his young age, Nathan Tanner already had such mature thoughts. Sneaking back to the small noodle shop, Sophia Lewis was still leaning against the sink, completely unaware of what had just happened with her son. "Mom, let me help you." Nathan Tanner rolled up his sleeves and moved closer. At that moment, he had no idea that his impulsive actions would bring storms into their lives. Elsewhere, Oliver Grant had used the shortest possible time to quickly gather all the necessary documents. It wasn't easy, he felt like crying. The mission that had tormented him for 4 long years could finally come to an end. However, he was slightly puzzled. If not ecstatic, at least that king of hell should show some joy. Right? Unfortunately, not at all. In fact, he seemed colder than ever before. Chapter 3, An Unexpected Reunion. Therefore, after placing the neatly arranged documents in front of Ethan Tanner, he only said one sentence, "President Tanner, here are the documents you requested." Then he stood still, not daring to utter another word, afraid that the wrath of the Grim Reaper might spill over to him. The 300-square-meter office, despite having the air conditioning on full blast, still exuded an icy chill that pierced to the bone. Ethan Tanner gripped the corner of an A4 sheet tightly, his gaze fixed on a photo of Sophia Lewis, her smile as radiant as a blooming flower. That damned woman. 4 years. He had spent 4 relentless years searching for her, and who would have thought she'd be right in front of him all along? The man's cold, sharp eyes glimmered with a frosty gleam. "Oliver Grant, get the car ready." Ethan Tanner stood up and left the office. He had to catch this woman himself. To make her pay back tenfold for everything he had endured over the past 4 years. "Humph, Sophia Lewis, your debt is due." At this moment, Sophia Lewis was entirely unaware of the danger closing in on her. She was still smiling and chatting while cleaning alongside Nathan Tanner. Suddenly, her phone rang, it was the landlord calling. Her expression shifted slightly as she quickly wiped her grease-stained hands on her apron and carefully answered the call. "Aunt Gigi, about the rent, could we?" "Oh, I'm not calling about the rent." Hearing this, Sophia breathed a quiet sigh of relief. "I wanted to ask, have you offended someone?" "Huh?" Sophia was taken aback. "Just now, someone from the CG Corporation called me asking about you. I told them your name was Lu Xiaomui, but they insisted that it wasn't your real name." CG Corporation. Sophia Lewis was instantly alarmed. She had clearly hidden her tracks so well, so how had she suddenly been exposed? "Aunt Gigi, I'll explain everything later." With that, Sophia hung up, sinking into deep thought. No matter what, she couldn't stay here any longer. She looked around the small noodle shop she had painstakingly built with a bit of reluctance, then gritted her teeth, stomped her foot, and dragged Nathan Tanner out the door. "Mom, it's almost mealtime. Where are we going? Aren't we opening the shop today?" Nathan Tanner whined incessantly like a sewing machine. Sophia Lewis just wanted to cry but couldn't shed a tear. At this point, thinking about doing business was out of the question, just keeping her small life intact was already fortunate enough. As she ran outside, a black Maybach sped toward her like a lightning bolt, stopping abruptly to block the path of the mother and son. Seeing the car, which looked somewhat familiar, Sophia Lewis froze in shock and quickly turned to flee. Out of nowhere, 7 or 8 identical SUVs appeared, forming a square formation and trapping Sophia Lewis and her son in the center. This setup was clearly intended for a capture, making Nathan Tanner feel uneasy. Could it be that his mother was truly a wanted criminal? "Mom, what are these people doing?" At that moment, Sophia Lewis only wanted to shield Nathan Tanner, desperate not to hear her son's words nor let the man discover the boy's existence. But now, it seemed too late to avoid this. The rear window of the Maybach slowly rolled down, revealing the handsome yet cold and emotionless face of a man. "Get in the car." Only 2 short words were spoken before the window closed again. Yet, those 2 words were enough to make Sophia Lewis tremble uncontrollably. "Miss Lewis, it's been a while." Oliver Grant appeared before her with a smile. "Who are you?" Nathan Tanner spread his arms protectively, boldly questioning, while carefully observing the scholarly-looking man in front of him. "Without my permission, you're not allowed to touch my mom." Hearing this, Oliver Grant chuckled. He crouched down to meet Nathan Tanner at eye level. "Nathan Tanner, I'm not a bad guy. Your mom knows me." He then looked up, his gaze intense as he locked eyes with Sophia Lewis. "Isn't that right, Miss Lewis?" Sophia Lewis quietly clenched her fists and nodded. At this moment, she could no longer deny it. "So, are you my mom's friend?" Seeing that Sophia Lewis didn't object, Nathan Tanner lowered his guard and finally exhaled in relief. "Of course. I'm your mom's friend. It's been a long time since we last met. Oh, I have a very cool Transformer model in my car. Would you like to come see it?" After introducing himself, Oliver Grant skillfully shifted the topic. He tried to maintain a calm expression, but inside, he was already ecstatic. Look at those eyebrows, those eyes, that nose, clearly cut from the same mold as his boss. A little boss had dropped straight from the heavens, and he was determined to serve him well. "Mom, can I go with this uncle?" Nathan Tanner pleaded with Sophia Lewis, his eyes full of hope. The boy loved Transformers the most, and as soon as he heard about it, his eyes lit up with excitement. At this point, how could Sophia Lewis say no? After all, Oliver Grant was just following his orders. Reluctantly, she nodded. "Let's go." Nathan Tanner grabbed Oliver Grant's hand, cheerfully hopping into a car behind them. Left with no choice, Sophia Lewis could only resign herself to the situation. She took a deep breath, slowly walked toward the Maybach, opened the door, and climbed in. The familiar scent lingered faintly in the air, but now it stirred no fluttering emotions within her, only an indescribable trembling unease. Sophia Lewis dared not lift her head. She stared intently at her faded shoes, unsure of what awaited her ahead. "Do you know how long I've been waiting for you?" Ethan Tanner's cold voice broke the silence moments later. Up close, his words were crystal clear. Each one struck like a musical note, pounding against Sophia Lewis's fragile heart. "Waiting. Waiting." Sophia Lewis grew restless, her anxiety mounting. She nervously licked her dry lips, mustering all her courage to squeeze out a voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz. "T2 minutes. No, 1,496 days." Ethan Tanner shot a sharp glance at Sophia Lewis, his tone icy. The unease in Sophia Lewis's heart grew stronger with each passing moment. Did he hate her that much? It was understandable. If it hadn't been for her interference, he would have married Diana Sanders long ago. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Sophia Lewis lowered her head in anguish. I just wanted to hold on to a small memory before you and Diana Sanders came together. At that time, she truly thought so. Little did she know that her night with Ethan Tanner would be blown out of proportion, shattering the relationship between him and Diana Sanders. Do you think a simple apology can fix everything? Ethan Tanner sneered coldly. Sophia Lewis pressed her lips together, remaining silent. After the scandal, the Lewis Corporation had quickly gone bankrupt. She was no longer the wealthy heiress of the Lewis family, left with nothing but regret. She honestly didn't know what else she could do besides apologizing. Silence enveloped the room. Ethan Tanner clenched his fists tightly, trying to steady his breathing and suppress his anger. The oil-stained apron still hung there, and the canvas shoes on her feet were so yellowed they were almost nauseating. Not to mention her disheveled appearance, the timid demeanor of the woman before him was a far cry from the vibrant girl with a radiant smile he once knew. Chapter 4, Mother in Critical Condition. Ethan Tanner didn't know whether to sigh at the hardships of life or scold her for getting what she deserved. She deserved it, leaving without a word and ending up in this mess now. At this moment, Sophia Lewis had no idea what Ethan Tanner was thinking. His silence only made her more anxious. She didn't dare to speak, but her body betrayed her, trembling uncontrollably. Her fears stemmed from what someone had once told her, that the Lewis Corporation's bankruptcy was orchestrated by Ethan Tanner himself. The motive, of course, was revenge for the night she had spent with him. Sophia Lewis didn't want to believe it, but she also didn't have the courage to confront it. So, she packed her things and left Riverfield with her mother. Now, facing a similar situation, how could she not be terrified? Ethan Tanner frowned, instinctively glancing at the rearview mirror. For today's meeting, he had even styled his hair the way he used to 4 years ago. Yet, up until now, this girl hadn't spared him even a single glance. Anger flared within him, and his deep eyes flashed with a cold glint. He reached out, lifting Sophia Lewis's chin, forcing her to look directly at him. Ethan Tanner's sudden action terrified Sophia Lewis. Just as their eyes were about to meet, she shut hers tightly in fear. She was scared that just one look into his eyes would unlock the Pandora's box of longing she had suppressed for so long, making it uncontrollable. Sophia Lewis, do you hate me that much? Ethan Tanner's thick, sharp brows furrowed tightly, his voice chilling enough to make anyone shiver. Sophia Lewis froze, shaking her head repeatedly. Trapped between Ethan Tanner's fingers, her small face turned pale, her lips losing all color. Finally, he softened, silently letting go of her. Sophia Lewis clutched her chest, gasping for air, her heart pounding uncontrollably. After more than 4 years apart, he was still as cold as ever. Thinking of Nathan Tanner, Sophia Lewis felt a pang in her heart. Welcome to the Lewis family's noodle shop. I'm Nathan Tanner. Nathan Tanner's mischievous voice suddenly rang out. It was the special ringtone Nathan Tanner had set for her. Sophia Lewis was startled and hurriedly fumbled to take out her phone. Hello. Is this Miss Sophia Lewis? Your mother is in critical condition. Please come to the nursing home immediately. Sophia Lewis froze, and it wasn't until the caller hung up that she snapped out of it, tears streaming down her face. Ethan Tanner suddenly felt a tightness in his chest and uncomfortably looked away. Tanner, President Tanner, my mother is in critical condition. Can you let me go? Her mother's condition made Sophia Lewis forget her fear of Ethan Tanner. She looked up and pleaded pitifully. Hearing how she addressed him, Ethan Tanner raised an eyebrow, his deep black eyes showing a trace of displeasure. Where is your mother? He stared straight ahead, his tone still calm. Sophia Lewis froze for a moment and bit her lower lip lightly. She knew this man too well, his question clearly signaled his refusal of her request. Serenity Haven Nursing Home. Sophia Lewis gritted her teeth and gave the address. Without needing Ethan Tanner's command, the driver had already turned the car around and sped towards Serenity Haven Nursing Home. The nursing home wasn't far from Sophia Lewis's small noodle shop, only a few minutes' drive, so quick that neither of them had time to say another word. As soon as the car stopped, Sophia Lewis jumped out and ran toward the gray building. Ethan Tanner slightly raised his head. When he noticed the CG Corporation logo on the gate, his expression instantly turned cold. Sophia Lewis stumbled into the hospital room and immediately saw Michael Gray sitting by the bed. "Why are you here?" Michael Gray stood up, slightly surprised, then seemed to think of something and frowned. Sophia Lewis didn't answer. Summoning all her courage, she finally dared to look toward her mother lying in the hospital bed. There was no white sheet covering her face, the medical equipment attached to her was still functioning normally. The tension in her nerves suddenly eased, and Sophia Lewis let out a sigh of relief. Her legs weakened, and she collapsed to the ground. "Sophia!" Michael Gray exclaimed, rushing over to help her up. Sophia Lewis's soft body exuded an alluring fragrance, causing Michael Gray's heart to flutter faintly. He took a deep breath, trying to restrain himself from pulling her into his arms. "I just had some phlegm stuck in my throat earlier. But I'm fine now." Even though he told himself not to get emotional, Michael Gray still reached out to gently stroke Sophia Lewis's hair. Sophia Lewis nodded repeatedly, her voice choked with emotion. "Michael, thank you." Michael Gray was about to respond when his gaze was unconsciously drawn to a figure gradually approaching. When he saw who it was, his face suddenly flushed red. Who else could it be but that man? Ethan Tanner was so furious he could explode. He had kindly followed along, only to find her in the arms of another man. And this man, it seemed, was rather handsome. If it weren't for the fact that there were patients present, he absolutely wouldn't hold back. At this moment, Sophia Lewis was still immersed in the joy of her mother being safe, completely unaware of Ethan Tanner's mood. Seeing her small hand tightly clutching another man's arm, Ethan Tanner's exquisitely handsome features turned as cold as ice. "Uncle, why are you here?" Michael Gray regained his composure, feigning surprise as he asked. Hearing this form of address, Ethan Tanner raised an eyebrow and glanced over. When he recognized Michael Gray, a look of disdain was evident in his eyes. Ethan Tanner paid no attention to Michael Gray, reaching out to pull Sophia Lewis toward him. Sophia Lewis seemed to awaken from a dream. She lifted her head and saw that the one pulling her was Ethan Tanner. Fear surged within her once again. "Oliver Grant, arrange for an ambulance to Serenity Haven Nursing Home. Have the director of Riverfield General Hospital accompany it, and prepare the best hospital room." Ethan Tanner made the call while holding Sophia Lewis by the shoulder, forcibly leading her out of the hospital room. Sophia Lewis's petite frame couldn't withstand such forceful pulling. She looked pitiful, like a feather caught in the wind, stumbling and barely managing to keep up with Ethan Tanner's strides. Michael Gray felt his heart ache as though it was being torn apart. He clenched his fists tightly, watching the two figures disappear into the distance, a shadow of darkness flickering in his eyes. Once again, she was dragged into the car, and Sophia Lewis's heart was filled with unease. If she had known this would happen, she would have called Michael Gray to confirm the situation beforehand. Now, everything was a mess. Not only had she been discovered, but even her mother was now under Ethan Tanner's control. Sophia Lewis felt utterly foolish. The man beside her exuded an even colder aura than the first time they met, so cold that she didn't dare utter a word. "Tell me, what's the story with the child?" After struggling to erase the recent scene from his mind, Ethan Tanner tried to use a calm tone to ask. Even with just one glance at Nathan Tanner, he was absolutely certain, that was his son. Chapter 5, The Rival Appears. Becoming a father in such a baffling way, and even missing the most crucial years of his child's growth, all of this was caused by this woman. Who would have thought that such a cold, bone-chilling tone would give Sophia Lewis the illusion that Ethan Tanner truly despised Nathan Tanner? The child was my decision alone. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Sophia Lewis stammered in panic, frantically shaking her head as she tried to explain. The more she spoke, the more flustered she became. Her anxious demeanor faintly brought back memories of her old self, stirring a trace of gentleness in Ethan Tanner's heart. But that fleeting softness was quickly shattered by Sophia Lewis's next words. "Don't worry. My son and I will absolutely not interfere in your life." Easy for her to say. Did she not realize that his life had already been turned upside down 4 years ago? Ethan Tanner, of course, didn't voice this thought. But Sophia Lewis's attempt to sever ties with him only made him feel more irritable. "When you drugged me back then, did you ever think about how today would turn out?" Ethan Tanner gritted his teeth, barely suppressing his anger as he questioned her. Sophia Lewis lowered her head, too afraid to speak. Back then, she had just turned 20, clueless about contraception, and only wanted her one-sided, hopeless love to have some kind of result. Who would have thought there'd actually be a result? This man had never liked being manipulated, and now he had been forced into fatherhood. He must be furious inside. Nathan Tanner is still young, he doesn't know anything. Sophia Lewis mustered all her courage to cautiously explain. "The child is innocent. If you want to punish someone, punish me instead." After saying this, Sophia Lewis tightly shut her eyes, bracing herself for Ethan Tanner's judgment. Ethan Tanner felt like he was about to lose his mind. He did want to punish this woman, but why did her words make him hesitate? As he looked at Sophia Lewis's beautiful but slightly pale face, Ethan Tanner unconsciously licked his lips. Punishment would come, just not yet. Where are you taking me?" After a long silence, Sophia Lewis finally snapped out of her daze. "Do you think you're in any position to question me?" Ethan Tanner scoffed coldly. Sophia Lewis bit her lower lip hard, not daring to say another word. At this point, she was like a fish on a chopping board, completely at Ethan Tanner's mercy. No matter what he wanted to do, she couldn't resist. What Sophia Lewis had never expected was that Ethan Tanner would directly take her back to the Tanner family's private estate. This was the most prime land in Riverfield, with hundreds of acres divided into various areas, including a private clubhouse for hosting guests, a luxurious cinema closed to outsiders, and the quietest area, the Tanner family's villa district. As the car drove through the lush green forest, Sophia Lewis felt increasingly suffocated. This place held too many memories for her. Returning now in such a disheveled state, she feared she wouldn't be able to handle the pressure. Ethan Tanner deliberately ignored Sophia Lewis's frightened expression, but the anger in his heart only grew stronger. Did this girl see him as some kind of monster to be so terrified of him? Could it be that her feelings had changed? Thinking of the image of her and Michael Gray embracing, Ethan Tanner became even more irritated. The reunion he had longed for day and night had turned into such an unpleasant scene. Someone had to pay for this. Michael Gray. Ethan Tanner silently repeated the name, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. The Maybach came to a stop in front of the main building of the Tanner family estate. Ethan Tanner ignored Sophia Lewis and got out of the car first. Sophia Lewis remained silent. She obviously couldn't stay alone in the car, so she had no choice but to follow him out. Young master. Young master. Don't let her filthy clothes dirty the carpet. Ethan Tanner said with a disdainful expression before turning and walking into the house. Humiliated by Ethan Tanner, Sophia Lewis could only allow the servants to arrange everything as she was led to a room in the villa. After bathing and changing clothes, Sophia Lewis was attended to as if she were a noblewoman preparing to meet the emperor. When she caught sight of herself in the mirror, Sophia Lewis froze in astonishment. A pristine white lace gown adorned her figure, her high ponytail accentuating her radiant beauty. She looked like an ethereal fairy descending to the mortal world. It had been so long since she'd worn anything so exquisite that it felt like a dream. "Miss Lewis, please lift your foot." The maid's voice interrupted Sophia Lewis's reverie. Not understanding the intention, she obediently raised her foot. Moments later, a pair of pastel pink leather shoes with rounded tips was slipped onto her feet. The silk ribbons at the heels were tied into delicate butterfly shapes around her slender calves. Sophia Lewis was stunned. She vividly remembered that 4 years ago, she had personally gone to Italy to custom order these shoes from a renowned designer. However, before she could receive them, the Lewis family had gone bankrupt. She couldn't comprehend how these shoes ended up in Ethan Tanner's possession. Once she was fully dressed, Sophia Lewis followed the maid through a hallway adorned with priceless antiques and into the main living room. "Mom!" Before she could take in her surroundings, Nathan Tanner threw himself into her arms. Her son's presence brought Sophia Lewis a wave of relief. Looking down, she noticed Nathan Tanner was also dressed impeccably in a child-sized tailcoat. At that moment, Ethan Tanner sat not far away on a genuine leather sofa. His long legs were crossed, his cold face exuding arrogance, and his sharp gaze fixated on Sophia Lewis with no attempt to conceal it. Sophia Lewis couldn't help but shiver, instinctively holding Nathan Tanner tighter in her arms. Little did she know, Ethan Tanner's heart was in turmoil. The girl from his memories had finally returned. But the thought of her embracing Michael Gray made it impossible for him to lower his pride. "Mom, is he really my dad?" Nathan Tanner pouted, glancing toward Ethan Tanner. "At this point, can you still deny it? Moreover, this identical face doesn't allow you to refute. No reaction means you've agreed, right?" Nathan Tanner glanced at Ethan Tanner with slight disdain. Not too bad, barely acceptable." Don't be fooled by the boy's indifferent demeanor. Deep down, he was actually overjoyed. Moreover, this father is not only handsome but also wealthy, and most importantly, he's his biological father. However, Nathan Tanner couldn't help but feel a little guilty because Uncle Gray had once promised to be his father too. But then again, who told Uncle Gray to delay marrying his mom? He had already done his research, only a marriage certificate can make it official. In the end, this is fate. Nathan Tanner's bland comment made Ethan Tanner frown, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. "Young master." At this moment, a maid approached and said, "Miss Sanders has arrived." As soon as the words fell, a tall woman walked in with a gentle smile. Her slightly wavy, reddish long hair cascaded over her shoulders. Her exquisite, sharp features resembled those of a mixed-race beauty. Though her makeup was minimal, it exuded a soft yet alluring charm. Seeing this familiar figure, Sophia Lewis felt as if she had been struck by lightning. So, they were still together after all. Sophia Lewis didn't know whether to feel happy or sad. Chapter 6, Taking the Boy Abroad. "Sophia, long time no see." Diana Sanders walked straight towards Sophia Lewis, spreading her arms to give her a tight hug. Sophia Lewis froze, standing stiffly in place. A waft of jasmine scent hit her nose, and she couldn't hold back, letting out a loud sneeze. Immediately, a few blotchy stains appeared on Diana Sanders' high-end pale pink evening gown. "Miss Diana, I'm so sorry." Sophia Lewis hastily reached out to wipe it off, but the more she wiped, the worse it smeared. She quickly withdrew her hand, her face flushing red, nervously looking down at the carpet. "Sophia, you're still the same as ever, not too fond of me, huh?" Diana Sanders chuckled, shaking her head with a hint of helplessness in her voice. Sophia Lewis was so embarrassed she wished she could disappear into the ground. Her animosity towards Diana Sanders was something nearly everyone in Riverfield knew about. Back then, she had been fearless and bold, wanting the whole world to know she liked Ethan Tanner. Looking back now, it was utterly mortifying. God knows how uncomfortable she felt at this moment. She regretted tagging along with Ethan Tanner to come here. "Who are you?" Nathan Tanner, seemingly sensing Sophia Lewis' discomfort, stepped forward protectively in front of her, blinking his big eyes as he asked. Diana Sanders smiled, patting Nathan Tanner's head. "I'm your mom's good friend." You can call me Aunt Diana. Nathan Tanner, with a look of disdain, stepped back 2 paces. Good friend. Then don't you know my mom is allergic to jasmine? Diana Sanders froze for a moment before breaking into a bright smile. Ah, you're right, I completely forgot. She hadn't expected that her first encounter after 4 years would end up with her losing to a little kid. And another thing, I don't like people of the opposite gender, except for my mom, touching my head. Nathan Tanner bluntly brushed Diana Sanders' hand away. If you keep doing such impolite things next time, I'll be upset. Nathan Tanner. Sophia Lewis panicked, lightly pinching her son's neck. Don't be rude like that. I didn't say anything wrong. Nathan Tanner puffed. His cheeks, pouting adorably. Boys and girls are different. Just because I'm little doesn't mean she can act so freely with me. Ethan Tanner, who had been silent throughout, subtly curved his lips into an almost imperceptible smile. As expected of his son, his intelligence was truly extraordinary. But very quickly, that smile disappeared beneath his cold exterior. This child is truly clever. Diana Sanders maintained her expression, smiling to cover her embarrassment, then turned to Ethan Tanner. Oh, right, Ethan, the contract from Westmount Corporation has been sent over. Their CEO noticed a few details that need further discussion and wants to speak with you privately. All right, I'll head to the study first. Ethan Tanner stood up, brushing past Sophia Lewis without sparing her a single glance from start to finish. Sophia Lewis felt a pang of bitterness, perhaps he would never stop hating her for the rest of his life. Ethan Tanner's figure quickly disappeared at the end of the staircase, and the corners of Diana Sanders' lips curled into an almost imperceptible smirk. Oliver Grant, take Nathan Tanner out to play. I'll escort Sophia back to her room, Diana Sanders said warmly, linking arms with Sophia Lewis. All right then, I'll leave it to you, Miss Sanders. Oliver Grant was just happy to spend a little more time with the young master. The little one was far more entertaining than his boss. Sophia, let's go. Diana Sanders pulled Sophia Lewis along, their closeness resembling that of real sisters. Room. What do you mean? Sophia Lewis was forced to follow Diana Sanders, her face full of confusion. Diana Sanders smiled. Of course, it means you and your son will be staying here. Sophia Lewis held her breath, her steps faltering. Why do we have to stay here? She asked, bewildered. Why? Naturally, because of Nathan Tanner. And, well, you are his mother after all. Diana Sanders tilted her head, her smile slightly unsettling. Diana Sanders harbored deep hatred toward Sophia Lewis. If it hadn't been for Sophia's interference back then, she and Ethan Tanner wouldn't still be entangled to this day. Now, not only has Diana Sanders returned, but she's also brought a child with her. If this isn't dealt with soon, the bond between Ethan Tanner and her will only grow weaker. She must make sure the mother and child disappear from this world completely. Immediately. Dragging Sophia Lewis into a room, half pulling, half forcing her, Diana Sanders watched as Sophia froze upon seeing the decor inside. Pink lace curtains, furniture styled after Barbie dolls, and all sorts of sparkling decorations. Sophia, if I remember correctly, this is the style you like the most, isn't it? Diana Sanders casually picked up a crystal Barbie doll. Sophia Lewis nodded unconsciously, the pink dreams buried deep in her heart slowly resurfacing. These were all prepared by Ethan on my instructions. I'm glad you like them. Diana Sanders said nonchalantly, her tone relaxed as though she were the true mistress of the house. Thank you, Sophia Lewis murmured, lowering her head. Diana Sanders' generosity only made her feel more ashamed. Sophia, raising a child on your own all these years must have been tough, hasn't it? Diana Sanders spoke as she skillfully locked the door behind her. It's been manageable, all the bitterness and humiliation of the past years had numbed her. It seems you're ready to part with your child, aren't you? Hearing this, Sophia Lewis looked up in shock. Miss Sanders, I don't understand what you mean. You don't know. Diana Sanders feigned surprise, widening her eyes. Ethan has decided to send Nathan to Northern Europe for kindergarten. He won't return to Riverfield until he's about 10 years old. Ethan's people will take care of Nathan, and no relatives will be allowed to visit. How could this be? Sophia Lewis murmured, her balance faltering as she nearly collapsed to the ground. Sophia, you know, as the heir to the CG Corporation, Nathan must have a strong psychological foundation. Ethan is doing this for his own good. Diana Sanders said with feigned concern, her words sounding like sincere advice. But at that moment, Sophia Lewis' spirit was completely shattered. Nathan was her son, how could that man decide her child's future? Just the thought of being separated from her son made Sophia Lewis' heart ache unbearably. Sophia, are you all right? Diana Sanders pretended to be worried. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have told you this. Sophia Lewis weakly shook her head, saying nothing. She knew Ethan Tanner's personality all too well. Once he made a decision, there was no changing it. Sophia, I thought Ethan would explain everything to you. You won't tell him that I talked to you about these things, will you? Diana Sanders asked nervously, like a bird startled by the rustling of leaves, her beautiful eyes veiled with a thin mist. Don't worry, Diana. I won't tell anyone. Sophia Lewis regained her composure and gave a faint smile. Chapter 007, The Escape Plan. On the contrary, she should thank Diana Sanders for revealing this truth to her. Hearing that, Diana Sanders secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The first step of the plan had succeeded. Well, I won't disturb you anymore. Get some rest. Diana Sanders smiled and gently patted Sophia Lewis on the shoulder. Taking advantage of her distraction, she quietly slipped a map under the base of the glass Barbie doll. Even after Diana Sanders left the room, Sophia Lewis was still reeling from her words. She had never thought about being separated from Nathan Tanner, no matter the reason. Thinking about this, Sophia Lewis made a decision. As if summoned by her thoughts, Nathan Tanner appeared just as Sophia Lewis was lost in memories of him. The boy pushed the door open and entered. His first words struck her like lightning. Oh my, is this really where someone lives? So tacky. A boy's room should have a Transformers theme. Little did he know, everything in the room was once Sophia Lewis's favorite. Look at this, and this. The boy criticized the room's decorations as he spoke, and finally, his gaze landed on the map Diana Sanders had left behind. Nathan Tanner. After a moment of hesitation, Sophia Lewis gathered her courage and said, I don't want to stay here anymore. You don't like this place. Nathan Tanner curiously picked up the map, glanced at it, and for a moment, his clear eyes darkened. Sophia Lewis nodded repeatedly, stammering, I feel like I don't belong here. Looks like you're not meant for the wealthy life. Nathan Tanner sighed and decisively said, all right then, let's leave right now. Are you really willing to leave this place? Sophia Lewis asked, somewhat disbelieving. This place is much better than our apartment. So what? Nathan Tanner pouted. You don't want to stay here. For me, home is wherever you are. He and his stepfather hadn't grown close yet, he had planned to talk to him later. But forget it, why bother, especially since his mom didn't like the man. If the stepfather was so useless, they didn't need him anyway. Nathan Tanner. Sophia Lewis, overwhelmed with emotion, planted a kiss on her son's cheek. Stop kissing me, you're getting spit everywhere. Nathan Tanner frowned, wiping his cheek with his hand. Mom, look, is this the map of this place? Sophia Lewis took the paper from her son's hand and realized it was indeed a map of the Tanner family estate. Where did you get this? She asked in surprise. Hey, it was just lying on the table. Nathan Tanner shrugged. Sophia Lewis was overjoyed. It seemed that even the heavens were helping them. After carefully studying the map, the only possible escape route was the wall behind the small flower garden. The wall was noted to be 2 meters high, and climbing over it would lead to desolate mountains. Following the trail upwards would eventually reach the main road. There was no other choice but to take a gamble. "Nathan Tanner, don't make a sound. Follow me." Sophia Lewis grabbed her son's hand, confidently leading the way. She thought having the map in her hands made her invincible, but after just a few steps, she found herself lost in the labyrinth-like maze of the Tanner family estate. As if being lost wasn't frustrating enough, they had to continuously dodge the servants who seemed to appear out of nowhere like ghosts. After several such encounters, Sophia Lewis was utterly exhausted. Finally, Nathan Tanner couldn't hold back any longer and shook off his mother's hand, stepping forward. "Nathan Tanner, Mom, don't say anything. Just listen to me." Nathan Tanner interrupted, his voice full of authority. Just as he finished speaking, a young maid appeared at the corner. Clearly, she was quite surprised to see the mother and son duo. "Miss, I want to see my dad. Can you tell me where he is?" Nathan Tanner put on a pitiful expression. His small, doll-like face, accentuated by rosy cheeks, was so adorable that it melted the maid's heart. "Young master, the master is in the study. Let me take you there. No need to trouble you." Nathan Tanner blinked his large, sparkling eyes and shook his head vigorously. "I want to surprise my dad. Just tell me where it is, and that'll be enough." "All right, the study is on the 2nd floor, turn right, and it's the 3rd room, thank you so much." Nathan Tanner stood on tiptoe, took the maid's hand, and gently kissed the back of it. His long lashes fluttered, making him look like a little fairy. "You'll be rewarded for this." The maid covered her face, her cheeks flushing red like blooming peach blossoms. "Shall we go then? Goodbye." Nathan Tanner pulled Sophia Lewis along, heading in the direction the maid had pointed. Once they reached a spot where the maid could no longer see them, Nathan Tanner stopped, confirmed that the maid had left, and immediately darted toward the location marked on the map. Using this method, Nathan Tanner successfully deceived a few servants and smoothly led Sophia Lewis to the garden at the back. Just as shown on the map, the wall surrounding the garden wasn't high, and beyond it stretched a vast expanse of lush green forest. In other words, as long as they escaped this place, they would be free. Having just reunited with Ethan Tanner only to part ways again, Sophia Lewis felt a lingering sadness in her heart. But who told him to try and take her son away from her? Nathan Tanner was her lifeline. Even if she had to give up the whole world, she would never leave her son. Sophia Lewis mustered all her strength to lift Nathan Tanner onto her shoulders. Nathan Tanner clung to his mother's shoulders and quickly climbed up the wall. "How is it? Can you get down?" Sophia Lewis asked anxiously. "There's a river outside." Nathan Tanner craned his neck to look. "It seems pretty deep." "A river?" Hearing this, Sophia Lewis froze and quickly pulled out the map to check. There was no indication of a river on the map. "Mom, let me see the map." Nathan Tanner took the map, studying it intently. His small brows furrowed like little caterpillars as he muttered, there really isn't any." "Who's there?" A sudden angry shout startled both mother and son, making their hearts leap. Nathan Tanner lost his balance and tumbled outside. Sophia Lewis froze. It wasn't until she heard the sound of a splash that she snapped out of it and screamed in despair, "Nathan Tanner!" Before her cry even ended, a figure shot out from behind, leaped over the wall with incredible speed, and dived into the river. Sophia Lewis desperately tried to climb over the wall, but her petite frame, barely 1.6 meters tall, simply couldn't make it up. After several failed attempts, she gritted her teeth, turned toward the main building, and shouted, "Help! Help!" Sure enough, her cries for help worked. Very quickly, several people rushed out from the exits of the main building. Leading them was Oliver Grant. "Miss Lewis, what happened?" "Nathan Tanner. Nathan Tanner, he fell." Sophia Lewis sobbed, unable to finish her sentence. Hearing this, Oliver Grant's pupils constricted. "Quick! Bring all the meat in the house here." Oliver Grant shouted. At this moment, Diana Sanders rushed out in panic, grabbed Oliver Grant, and asked fearfully, "Have you seen Ethan?" "Young master." Oliver Grant froze, looking around. "Wasn't he in the study?" "I don't know what happened. I just saw him suddenly rush out and then disappear." Hearing this, Sophia Lewis's mind buzzed loudly. Chapter 008, The Flesh-Eating Fish. Could the person who just jumped down be Ethan Tanner? Seeing Sophia Lewis's pale, small face, Oliver Grant quickly reacted and shouted loudly to everyone, "Quick! The young master is also in the river." The atmosphere grew even heavier, and everyone's expressions turned extremely serious. Large chunks of bloody beef were carried over and thrown directly over the wall into the river. The next group of people, all dressed in strange, fully covered outfits, carefully checked their equipment before climbing over the wall and jumping into the river. Sophia Lewis stood frozen, her heart sinking deeper and deeper. This action was utterly baffling, she had no idea what their purpose was. Slap! A thunderous slap echoed beside her. Sophia Lewis looked up in a daze, meeting the sharp gaze of Diana Sanders. "Sophia Lewis, do you even know there are man-eating fish in that river? If anything happens to Ethan, how will you compensate?" "Man-eating fish?" Sophia Lewis nearly fainted. "Found him. Pull him up quickly." A shout came from beyond the wall. As soon as the words were spoken, the pulley system that had been set up began to operate. The creaking sound was like a sharp knife stabbing straight into Sophia Lewis's heart. She wanted to look but was too scared to. She feared that what would appear before her would be two white skeletons. Her nails dug deep into her palms, and fresh blood dripped from between her fingers. Sophia Lewis felt no pain. She stared fixedly at the pulley, forcing herself to keep her eyes wide open. Finally, Nathan Tanner's small figure came into view. Without hesitation, Sophia Lewis rushed over, frantically checking him all over. Thankfully, aside from a scratch on his forehead, there were no other injuries. "Mom!" Nathan Tanner reached out and wrapped his arms around her neck, sobbing. "Dad, Dad." Sophia Lewis did not respond because she had already seen Ethan Tanner being carried in by others. The finely tailored suit was now in tatters, his muscular body covered in countless wounds, both large and small, with blood still oozing from several deep cuts. His handsome face had lost all vitality, pale as a sheet of paper. Her heart felt as though it had been torn apart, the pain so intense that she could hardly breathe. Finally, unable to withstand the shock, she fainted. Sophia Lewis dreamed of Ethan Tanner struggling in a river teeming with flesh-eating fish. The sharp-toothed creatures frantically tore at every inch of his flesh. "No," she screamed, jolting awake with a start. Silence. Thank goodness, it was only a dream. But as she recalled the image of Ethan Tanner unconscious, her chest ached again. The scene before her was completely unfamiliar, it seemed to be a hotel room. She couldn't understand, she had clearly passed out at the Tanner family estate, so how had she ended up here? Sophia Lewis quickly stood up and opened the door, only to see two men in black suits she had never met before standing outside. "Who are you?" Sophia Lewis asked warily, stepping back 2 paces. "Miss Lewis, please come with us." One of the men ignored her question and abruptly stepped forward, grabbing her arms and dragging her out of the room. Sophia Lewis struggled, but it was useless, they forced her into a car. Glancing around, she noticed a plastic bag containing her personal documents and took a sharp breath. These items had clearly been left in her small apartment, how had they ended up in their hands? What exactly do you want? She gritted her teeth, trying to suppress her anger. Still, no one answered. When the car drove straight to the airport, she finally understood, they intended to take her out of Riverfield. Knowing she was no match for these men, Sophia Lewis remained obedient throughout the journey. Sandwiched between the two men in black, she was escorted through the VIP lane, leaving her no chance to call for help. Airport staff seemed oblivious to Sophia Lewis's pleading eyes, even deliberately avoiding her, afraid of getting involved. Despair began to seep into Sophia Lewis's heart. Perhaps because she was too well behaved, the group of men in black let their guard down. When passing through the security checkpoint, they allowed her to line up first while they huddled together, whispering about something. An idea suddenly came to her. Taking advantage of the moment when one of the men in black wasn't paying attention, she pinched the woman in front of her hard on the backside. The young woman screamed loudly, turning around to glare at Sophia Lewis with furious eyes. Sophia Lewis, feigning innocence, shook her head and pouted toward the man in black behind her. "What's wrong with you? How dare you grope me in broad daylight?" The woman grabbed the collar of the accused man in black and began loudly scolding him. Just as her family and friends were lining up nearby, they noticed the commotion and immediately gathered around. A few men even rolled up their sleeves, looking ready to start a fight. The curious crowd grew larger and quickly surrounded the man in black. Finally escaping their sight, Sophia Lewis pushed her way out of the crowd and ran off without looking back. As she exited the airport, a taxi happened to be dropping off a passenger. Gritting her teeth, Sophia Lewis jumped into the back seat. "Where to?" the driver asked. Sophia Lewis was about to give the address of the Tanner family's estate but hesitated and swallowed her words. To the city center," she stammered. The driver glanced at her curiously but said nothing. As soon as the taxi started moving, two men in black began chasing after it. Sophia Lewis quickly ducked down and only sat upright again after the car had merged onto the highway. She had finally escaped them, but what was she supposed to do next? Ethan Tanner's life or death was uncertain, and Nathan Tanner had disappeared without a trace. Sophia Lewis felt utterly lost, her mind in chaos. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Ethan Tanner covered in blood flashed before her. Suddenly, the taxi came to a stop. "We're at the city center. That'll be 120 yuan. The driver's voice jolted Sophia Lewis out of her daze. It was only then that she realized she didn't have a single cent on her. "Driver, could I borrow your phone to call a friend?" Sophia Lewis asked softly. I left in such a rush that I didn't bring anything with me. No money but still calling a cab. "Are you kidding me?" the driver muttered, though he still tossed her his phone. Sophia Lewis dialed Michael Gray's number, but the line was busy. After hesitating for a while, she reluctantly called a number she hadn't contacted in a long time. "Hello." A young, energetic female voice answered. "Hannah, it's me. Sophia." Before she could finish her sentence, the voice on the other end interrupted her with a shout. "Where are you?" I'm in the city center." Sophia Lewis glanced at the driver awkwardly and lowered her voice. "Can you help me? Send me your location. If you dare wander off, you're dead meat." The girl hung up before Sophia Lewis could respond. Less than 10 minutes later, a dazzling red Ferrari stopped in front of Sophia Lewis. The person stepping out of the driver's seat was none other than her best friend of over 10 years. The heiress of the Carter Corporation, Hannah Carter. Chapter 009, Snatching the Sun. The spaghetti-strap top and short shorts perfectly accentuated her fiery figure, while her delicate, angelic face remained untouched by the dust of the world, a true embodiment of the saying, "Student face, parent body." Even the taxi driver, who was over 50, couldn't help but steal a glance. "Hannah. Out of money to pay for the cab again? Oh my God, every time something happens, I have to come clean up your mess." It was like this before, and it's still like this now. Hannah Carter grumbled as she paid the fare for Sophia Lewis, then tugged her into her sports car. Tell me, where have you been all these years? Hannah Carter gripped the steering wheel, her tone softening slightly. Just wandering everywhere, Sophia Lewis replied with a bitter smile and a shake of her head. The hardships of the past few years couldn't be summed up in a few words. The urgent matter now was to confirm Ethan Tanner's situation, and of course, she also had to take Nathan away. Michael Gray was out of reach, and in Riverfield, the only person she could rely on was Hannah Carter. When she recounted everything that happened today to Hannah, Hannah's mouth fell open in astonishment, forming an "oh" shape, and she stayed that way for a long time. Oh my God, Sophia. You're amazing. Back then, it was famous overnight, and now you even have a child with Ethan Tanner. It was just an accident. Sophia Lewis bit her lip gently, explaining with slight embarrassment. Who cares if it was an accident or not, at least you've tied him down now. Hannah Carter was as thrilled as if her own daughter had just landed an exceptional son-in-law. I'd love to see how those rich heiresses compete with you for the third young Master Tanner. Hannah, I want to take my son and mom out of there now. Can you help me figure out a way? Sophia Lewis grabbed Hannah Carter's wrist, her voice filled with urgency. All right. Hannah Carter agreed immediately. From what you said, the third young Master Tanner's situation must be pretty tense right now. Who knows how many people are lurking in the shadows, waiting to harm you. Ensuring your family's safety is the top priority. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through a few group chats, and quickly found information about Ethan Tanner. He's at Riverfield People's Hospital. Let's go, she said, stepping on the gas and speeding off. That fast? Sophia Lewis was surprised. The third young master is a delectable piece of cake that all the high society ladies in Riverfield crave. Even the slightest stir involving him spreads like wildfire among the elite. Your little boy is the hottest topic right now. The more Hannah Carter spoke, the more excited she became. She couldn't wait to meet Ethan Tanner and Sophia Lewis's child. So my son is at the hospital too? Receiving an affirmative response, Sophia Lewis breathed a silent sigh of relief. Her mother, Margaret Young, was also at the same hospital, so conveniently, she could pick up both her mother and herself together. Sure enough, the entrance of Riverfield People's Hospital was lined with luxury cars, indicating that the young ladies from noble families, having caught wind of the news, had rushed to the hospital. As she got out of the car, Sophia Lewis casually grabbed the baseball cap Hannah Carter had left on the passenger seat and put it on before hurriedly following Hannah Carter into the hospital building. Hannah Carter's uncle was the chairman of the hospital's board of directors, and since she often lingered around the place, it didn't take her much effort to find out the floor and room number of Ethan Tanner. The VIP building was tucked away in a small garden behind the main medical building. Only a select few of Riverfield's elite were privileged enough to stay there, so it was usually a quiet place. However, at this moment, it was unusually bustling. A group of elegantly dressed young women, carrying various gifts, craned their necks to peer inside, only to have their view blocked by Oliver Grant, who stood at the door. I will pass along everyone's kind regards to the third young master. Right now, he doesn't wish to meet anyone, so please, everyone, head back. Oliver Grant's smile was so forced that his face looked stiff. Only heaven knew how worried he was. Ethan Tanner was still unconscious. When he woke up and found out that Sophia Lewis had disappeared from the Tanner family mansion, Oliver Grant couldn't imagine the fury he would face. He couldn't fathom how someone alive and well could suddenly vanish without a trace. 2 years ago, Ethan Tanner had ordered all the cameras in the house to be removed, making Sophia Lewis's whereabouts a complete mystery. Of course, he had no idea that Sophia Lewis had blended into the crowd of noble ladies before him and was secretly observing his every move. Hannah, what should we do now? Sophia Lewis whispered. She definitely didn't want Oliver Grant to know she was here, so there was no way she could go through the main entrance. "Follow me." Hannah Carter grabbed Sophia Lewis and quietly led her out of the crowd. Reaching a door marked, "Private Staff Access," Hannah Carter used her fingerprint to unlock it, turning back to grin smugly at Sophia Lewis before pulling her inside. "Sophia, I'll find a way to get your mom out. You quickly go find your son. Let's meet back here later, okay?" "All right." Sophia Lewis nodded, then she and Hannah Carter each took a separate elevator to go upstairs. Thinking about the fact that she was about to see Nathan Tanner again, Sophia Lewis couldn't help but feel emotional. That little boy, who had never been apart from her since he was small, was he crying now? Sophia Lewis had no idea that, at this very moment, as she was feeling sorry for herself, Nathan Tanner was in Ethan Tanner's hospital room, battling wits and courage with Diana Sanders because of her. "Nathan, don't worry too much. Your father will be fine." Diana Sanders gritted her teeth in frustration but could only watch helplessly as Nathan Tanner guarded Ethan Tanner's bedside, glaring at her with full suspicion. That brat. He absolutely refused to let her get close to Ethan Tanner. She couldn't even figure out what she had done to offend this little boy. "I'm not worried about Dad, I'm worried about you." Nathan Tanner blinked his big, sparkling eyes and smiled innocently. "Worried about me?" Diana Sanders was so startled by his smile that she laughed nervously. "What is there to worry about with me? Of course, I'm worried you'll take advantage of my mom's absence and pull something on my dad," the little boy said seriously. This time, Diana Sanders couldn't laugh anymore. She just wanted to grab this sly little brat by his slippery neck and toss him straight out the window. Unfortunately, now was not the time. "Nathan, you've misunderstood." "Misunderstood?" Nathan Tanner raised his thick eyebrows, rudely cutting her off. "Are you my dad's wife?" Of course not." Diana Sanders blushed furiously. "Then are you my dad's girlfriend?" She wished. "Then why were you touching my dad's face? If that's not pulling something, then what is?" Nathan Tanner pouted his little pink lips, his clear eyes brimming with confidence. "I've seen right through you." Diana Sanders felt both embarrassed and furious but couldn't refute him at all. She truly couldn't understand how, as an adult, she was losing an argument to a 3-year-old child. "Auntie, you need to remember this, men and women should maintain proper distance. I'm sure your mom taught you that." Nathan Tanner said sternly, his cold and distant expression between his brows mirroring Ethan Tanner's when he was angry, making Diana Sanders break out in a cold sweat. Chapter 010, He is my father. "Anyway, that's how Mom taught me." Nathan Tanner suddenly smirked, revealing a radiant, angelic face. "Do you think I learned it well?" Hearing this, Diana Sanders secretly breathed a sigh of relief. So, this little boy was imitating Sophia Lewis. Thinking about Sophia Lewis, Diana Sanders couldn't help but feel smug. By now, that girl must have boarded the plane, never to return for the rest of her life. Nathan Tanner. Lost in thought, Diana Sanders was startled by Sophia Lewis's sudden voice behind her, sending chills down her spine. Turning around, she saw Sophia Lewis standing at the door, tears brimming in her eyes, and Diana's heart tightened. Why is she still here? Mom! Nathan Tanner joyfully ran into Sophia Lewis's embrace. Sophia Lewis held her warm little boy tightly, kissing the top of his head repeatedly as tears streamed down like a waterfall. Don't cry, Mom. I'm fine. If you want to cry, go cry with Dad. With that, the little boy grabbed Sophia Lewis's hand and led her to Ethan Tanner's bedside. Auntie, my mom and dad need some private time. Can you leave the room, please? Nathan Tanner blinked at Diana Sanders, bluntly ordering her out. All right, take your time talking. Diana Sanders reluctantly left the room. As soon as the door closed, the gentle smile on her face vanished, replaced with a fleeting glint of malice in her eyes. The room fell silent. Sophia Lewis looked at Ethan Tanner lying on the hospital bed, her heart aching so much it was hard to breathe. Is this still the man she loves? Sophia Lewis wasn't sure anymore. His handsome face was as pale as a sheet, lifeless, eyes closed, lying there quietly, so close, yet so distant. Mom, Dad is seriously injured. Nathan Tanner lifted a corner of the blanket to show Sophia Lewis. Sophia Lewis couldn't help but gasp. Ethan Tanner's upper body was tightly wrapped in white bandages, resembling a mummy. The severity of his injuries was unimaginable. She desperately wanted to stay and take care of him until he recovered, but remembering Diana Sanders' words, Sophia Lewis clenched her teeth and grabbed Nathan Tanner's hand. Nathan Tanner, we're leaving. Nathan Tanner pulled his hand away and stood still. Dad lost so much blood, all because of me. Nathan Tanner's small lips quivered, his face filled with grievance that tugged at the heartstrings. Mom, I want to stay and take care of Dad. No. Sophia Lewis coldly shook her head. We must leave right now. Why? Nathan Tanner looked up, his innocent eyes glowing with seriousness as he stared at Sophia Lewis. Didn't you always teach me to be grateful and repay kindness? Dad is my biological father, and he saved my life. Why are we abandoning him when he needs us the most? If he wakes up, he'll be so sad. Sophia Lewis froze, stunned by Nathan Tanner's firm and heartfelt words. Although this child often said things far beyond his age, such touching and profound words were a first. Sophia Lewis was momentarily at a loss for words. Ethan Tanner had just risked his life to save Nathan Tanner. How could she cruelly tell her son that his father wanted to take him abroad, separating him from his mother? She took a deep breath, bent down, and gently lifted her son's small face. Nathan Tanner, I'll explain to you later. Wouldn't it be better to explain right now? A cold male voice suddenly rang out, startling Sophia Lewis. Ethan Tanner stared icily at the woman who was planning to take his son away. The pain in his heart was far worse than the physical wounds on his body. Dad, you're awake. Nathan Tanner broke free from Sophia Lewis's grasp and ran to Ethan Tanner's side. His big, sparkling eyes made Ethan Tanner unable to resist reaching out to pinch his son's cheek. If not for the sake of this sensible child, he might have already lost his temper. You're awake. Sophia Lewis fumbled nervously. Thank you for saving Nathan Tanner. No need for your thanks. Ethan Tanner closed his eyes and frowned slightly. Anyone could hear the irritation in his voice. Sophia Lewis lowered her head. Though she was used to his cold words, she still felt embarrassed in front of their son. The atmosphere suddenly grew tense, as if the air had frozen, chilling everyone to the bone. Dad, you're a patient. Getting angry isn't good for your recovery. Nathan Tanner said sweetly, his large, adorable eyes narrowing into crescent moons as he smiled. The little boy wasn't naive, he could clearly see that his dad was upset with his mom, and that wasn't a good sign. Nathan Tanner's warm voice was like a ray of sunshine, melting the icy heart of Ethan Tanner. Nathan Tanner furrowed his brows, staring intently at the white bandages wrapped around Ethan Tanner's body. His chubby little face clearly showed worry. Dad, it must hurt a lot. It's not that bad. Ethan Tanner looked at the boy whose face was an exact replica of his own, his heart softening. Dad, how about letting Mom stay to take care of you? Huh? The sudden change in topic left both Sophia Lewis and Ethan Tanner momentarily stunned. My mom is very capable. She used to be an excellent nurse at the hospital, and everyone praised her for being so meticulous in taking care of patients. Nathan Tanner beamed sweetly. I guarantee you'll be satisfied. A nurse? Ethan Tanner slightly furrowed his brows. Nathan Tanner, stop spouting nonsense. Sophia Lewis hurriedly pulled her son back, glaring at him to signal him to stay quiet. I'm not lying, it's true. Nathan Tanner, not only ignoring her, continued persuading Ethan Tanner. Dad, just hire my mom. I'll even give you a discount of 5%. After all, you're my biological father. Paying a fee for being taken care of by you? Ethan Tanner asked, slightly displeased. He had risked his life to save this little rascal, and now the kid was bargaining with him. Ethan Tanner felt a bit hurt. Nathan Tanner grinned mischievously, his fair little face flushed pink with excitement, looking absolutely adorable. All right then, no charge for Dad. He patted his chest generously, then turned to Sophia Lewis. Mom, I'm leaving Dad in your hands. Only then did Ethan Tanner realize he had been set up. What on earth was this? Sophia Lewis wanted to cry. She had come here to pick up Nathan Tanner, so how had she suddenly become Ethan Tanner's caretaker? At that moment, loud arguing could be heard from outside the door. Upon listening closely, it seemed to include Hannah Carter's voice. Could something have happened? I'll go check. Sophia Lewis said in a fluster, spinning around and pushing the door open to leave. Sure enough, Hannah Carter stood with hands on her hips, pointing angrily, and the person she was pointing at was none other than Oliver Grant. Why can't I take her away? Who are you to stop me? Hannah Carter shouted angrily, her beautiful face flushed red with fury. Sophia Lewis was momentarily at a loss for words. Ethan Tanner had just risked his life to save Nathan Tanner, how could she cruelly tell her son that his father wanted to take him abroad, separating him from his mother? She took a deep breath, bent down, and gently lifted her son's small face. Nathan Tanner, I'll explain to you later. Wouldn't it be better to explain right now? A cold male voice suddenly rang out, startling Sophia Lewis. Ethan Tanner stared icily at the woman who was planning to take his son away. The pain in his heart was far worse than the physical wounds on his body. Dad, you're awake. Nathan Tanner broke free from Sophia Lewis's grasp and ran to Ethan Tanner's side. His big, sparkling eyes made Ethan Tanner unable to resist reaching out to pinch his son's cheek. If not for the sake of this sensible child, he might have already lost his temper. You're awake. Sophia Lewis fumbled nervously. Thank you for saving Nathan Tanner. No need for your thanks. Ethan Tanner closed his eyes and frowned slightly. Anyone could hear the irritation in his voice. Sophia Lewis lowered her head. Though she was used to his cold words, she still felt embarrassed in front of their son. The atmosphere suddenly grew tense, as if the air had frozen, chilling everyone to the bone. Dad, you're a patient. Getting angry isn't good for your recovery. Nathan Tanner said sweetly, his large, adorable eyes narrowing into crescent moons as he smiled. The little boy wasn't naive, he could clearly see that his dad was upset with his mom, and that wasn't a good sign. Nathan Tanner's warm voice was like a ray of sunshine, melting the icy heart of Ethan Tanner. Nathan Tanner furrowed his brows, staring intently at the white bandages wrapped around Ethan Tanner's body. His chubby little face clearly showed worry. Dad, it must hurt a lot. It's not that bad. Ethan Tanner looked at the boy whose face was an exact replica of his own, his heart softening. Dad, how about letting Mom stay to take care of you? Huh? The sudden change in topic left both Sophia Lewis and Ethan Tanner momentarily stunned. My mom is very capable. She used to be an excellent nurse at the hospital, and everyone praised her for being so meticulous in taking care of patients. Nathan Tanner beamed sweetly. I guarantee you'll be satisfied. A nurse? Ethan Tanner slightly furrowed his brows. Nathan Tanner, stop spouting nonsense. Sophia Lewis hurriedly pulled her son back, glaring at him to signal him to stay quiet. I'm not lying, it's true. Nathan Tanner, not only ignoring her, continued persuading Ethan Tanner. Dad, just hire my mom. I'll even give you a discount of 5%. After all, you're my biological father. Paying a fee for being taken care of by you? Ethan Tanner asked, slightly displeased. He had risked his life to save this little rascal, and now the kid was bargaining with him. Ethan Tanner felt a bit hurt. Nathan Tanner grinned mischievously, his fair little face flushed pink with excitement, looking absolutely adorable. All right then, no charge for Dad. He patted his chest generously, then turned to Sophia Lewis. Mom, I'm leaving Dad in your hands. Only then did Ethan Tanner realize he had been set up. What on earth was this? Sophia Lewis wanted to cry. She had come here to pick up Nathan Tanner, so how had she suddenly become Ethan Tanner's caretaker? At that moment, loud arguing could be heard from outside the door. Upon listening closely, it seemed to include Hannah Carter's voice. Could something have happened? I'll go check. Sophia Lewis said in a fluster, spinning around and pushing the door open to leave. Sure enough, Hannah Carter stood with hands on her hips, pointing angrily, and the person she was pointing at was none other than Oliver Grant. Why can't I take her away? Who are you to stop me? Hannah Carter shouted angrily, her beautiful face flushed red with fury. Chapter 11, Hello, Aunt Hannah. Ms. Carter, the third young master has ordered that no one is to lay a finger on Mrs. Young, not even a single strand of her hair. Oliver Grant clasped his hands behind his back, his expression stern. He stood nearly 6 feet tall, creating a stark contrast next to the petite Hannah Carter. Hannah Carter gritted her teeth. What if I insist on taking her away? Then don't blame me for being rude. Oliver Grant said coldly, signaling with his eyes. 2 tall men immediately stepped forward, standing between them. You think only the Tanner family has people? Let me tell you, the Carter Corporation isn't so easily bullied. Hannah Carter muttered as she pulled out her phone, seemingly about to call for reinforcements. Seeing the situation escalating, Sophia quickly ran over. Hannah, wait. She grabbed Hannah Carter's hand and shook her head firmly. Mrs. Lewis. Oliver Grant greeted joyfully, stepping quickly in front of Sophia and examining her carefully. You're all right, that's such a relief. Sophia forced a smile in response. She still didn't know how she had gone from the Tanner residence to the hotel and couldn't trust anyone from the Tanner family. Where's your son? Hannah Carter looked around. Still in the hospital room. Sophia gave a bitter smile. Ethan Tanner has woken up. What? The third young master is awake. Hearing this, Oliver Grant was overjoyed, completely ignoring the ongoing conflict as he rushed toward Ethan Tanner's hospital room. Hannah Carter watched Oliver Grant's tall figure retreat and let out a disdainful humph. The plan failed. She pouted. When I arrived, Mrs. Young had just been transferred to a room on this floor, and then that Oliver Grant caught me. Ugh, enough about me. Why isn't your son with you? He refused to leave. Sophia Lewis sighed. He even insisted I stay and take care of Ethan Tanner. That kid, could he be blinded by the Tanner family's wealth? Hannah Carter said, pulling Sophia Lewis by the hand. Come on, take me to see that money-hungry kid. Sophia Lewis was dragged back to the hospital room by Hannah Carter, just in time to see Nathan Tanner animatedly telling jokes to Ethan Tanner. Kids will be kids, their jokes might not be funny to adults, but Ethan Tanner listened attentively. It was rare to see the father and son getting along so well, and an indescribable feeling welled up in Sophia Lewis's heart. Young Master Tanner, it's been a while. Hannah Carter greeted with a smile, completely shedding her sharp demeanor from earlier when facing Oliver Grant. After all, he was a man she once liked, and maintaining her image was still important. Ethan Tanner quickly erased the fleeting warmth from his face, his sharp features now exuding coldness, his expression filled with disdain, as if he were facing a stranger trying to sell him something. Hannah Carter couldn't help but sigh inwardly. She had thought Ethan Tanner was cold before, but now she realized he was utterly heartless. Luckily, she had withdrawn early and spared herself from wasting more feelings on him. For that, she had to thank Sophia Lewis. "Who are you?" Nathan Tanner skipped over to Hannah Carter, tilting his small head curiously. "Oh my!" Hannah Carter quickly covered her mouth, unable to suppress her exclamation of surprise. This little boy, he looked so much like Ethan Tanner. Like two peas in a pod, except the boy's brows weren't as sharp, and his face still carried the chubby innocence of childhood. When he grew up, he'd surely be even more handsome than his father. "Nathan Tanner, this is your mom's good friend, Aunt Hannah." Seeing Hannah Carter hesitate to answer, Sophia Lewis quickly stepped in. "Your Aunt Hannah." Nathan Tanner's large, starry eyes sparkled like gems, captivating everyone who looked at him. Hannah Carter was stunned, gazing at the little boy as if hypnotized, nodding her head. Nathan Tanner smiled, his fair face radiant, pink lips forming a charming pout, and dimples fleetingly appearing and disappearing. "Mom often talks about you." Nathan Tanner giggled, squinting his eyes as he held Hannah Carter's hand and gently kissed the back of it. "Official greetings." "Hello, Aunt Hannah." Hannah Carter felt like her heart was about to explode. "Oh, I'm going to die." She clutched her chest, gasping for breath. "Sophia, I need some air." With that, she turned and dashed out of the hospital room. "Hannah!" Sophia Lewis called out in concern, chasing after her. Hannah Carter stood on the balcony, breathing heavily, her face as red as a beet. "Sophia, what do I do? Your son has completely won me over." Hannah Carter looked at Sophia Lewis with a distressed expression, her eyes shimmering with the bashful glow typical of a young girl. Sophia Lewis was dumbstruck, as if struck by lightning. Goodness, how can a 3-year-old know how to flirt like that? Hannah Carter covered her face, her heart pounding. "Sophia Lewis, Sophia, I'm not going to be your son's godmother anymore. How about we become in-laws instead?" Hannah Carter suddenly grabbed Sophia Lewis's hand, speaking earnestly. Sophia Lewis chuckled helplessly. "Hannah, let's wait until you have a daughter before discussing this, all right?" "Oh, right." Hannah Carter seemed to snap out of it and nodded. Perhaps the strong wind blowing through the balcony helped her regain her composure. Finally, Hannah Carter took a deep breath and calmed down. "Sorry, I got a little carried away," Hannah Carter said, embarrassed to the point of wanting to disappear. "Ah, the curse of being perpetually single. Please understand." "Impossible." This time, it was Sophia Lewis's turn to be shocked. "Hannah, don't scare me. Isn't it all Ethan Tanner's fault? He set my standards way too high." Hannah Carter sighed. Hearing this, Sophia Lewis fell silent. Ethan Tanner was the dreamboat among the wealthy socialites in Riverfield. Anyone who met him couldn't help but be captivated by his looks and charm. Both Hannah and Sophia had once admired Ethan Tanner, which had caused some awkward moments between them. Of course, Hannah Carter hadn't been as infatuated with Ethan Tanner as Sophia Lewis had been. For that reason, she felt it was only right to step aside for her best friend. Quietly, she withdrew and even helped Sophia create opportunities to meet Ethan. In fact, during the successful theft incident at the bar that night, Hannah Carter had played an indispensable role. Ah, Ethan Tanner really lucked out, ending up with such a sweet son. Hannah Carter sighed dramatically, her face filled with regret, as if her treasure had been stolen. "By the way, Sophia, are you really planning to stay and take care of him?" "I don't want to." Sophia Lewis groaned, clearly exasperated. "But Nathan Tanner insists on it. I can't bear to upset him." "Then just stay." Hannah Carter leaned against the balcony railing, winking at her friend. But, I'm scared. Sophia Lewis hesitated. How about this, during the day you stay here to take care of him, and at night, bring Nathan Tanner to my house. That way, it will be safer. Chapter 12, Personal Caregiver. At this point, it seemed there was no other choice. Sophia Lewis had no option but to nod in agreement. The two returned to the hospital room. Ethan Tanner's overwhelming presence caused Hannah Carter, who was usually full of confidence, to falter slightly. Ethan Tanner was already sitting up. Despite wearing an outer coat, it didn't seem to provide much warmth. The thick layers of bandages wrapped around him were startling to behold. Mr. Tanner, let's discuss something, shall we? Hannah Carter, wrapping her arm around Sophia Lewis's waist, smiled and said, Sophia and I haven't seen each other in years. We need more time to catch up. During the day, she's all yours to command however you like, but at night, can she stay at my place? This was the perfect example of what it meant to receive a cold shoulder despite offering warmth. Ethan Tanner completely ignored Hannah Carter's words, as if he hadn't heard her at all. His gaze remained fixed on Nathan Tanner, who was sprawled on the bed, engrossed in his drawing. That side profile, so strikingly handsome it could make anyone envious and indignant. His expression, although seemingly aloof, carried an indescribable hint of gentleness. The atmosphere suddenly turned chillingly cold. Ethan Tanner clearly had no intention of responding, leaving it to Oliver Grant to step in and mediate. Apologies, Miss Carter, but as the personal nurse for the third young master, Miss Lewis is required to stay by his side 24/7, Oliver Grant explained calmly. Hearing this, Sophia Lewis quickly protested, I never agreed to 24/7, I agree. Nathan Tanner suddenly raised his small, fair hand, his smile as bright as a blooming flower. Sophia Lewis was so furious she nearly spat blood. This little brat, betraying her like this. Mom, Dad's so seriously injured he can barely get out of bed. How could you leave him here alone at night? The little one crossed his arms and pouted, as if Sophia had committed an unforgivable crime. That statement melted Ethan Tanner's heart, bringing a faint smile to his lips. Sophia Lewis felt like crying but had no tears. People often said daughters were closer to their fathers, but here her 3-year-old son was already siding with an outsider. Isn't that fool still here? Hannah Carter, sensing things weren't going well, shifted her gaze toward Oliver Grant. Fool. Oliver Grant's lips twitched slightly. Aunt Hannah, this is different. We're family, and family should take care of each other, right? What does this have to do with Uncle Oliver Grant? Nathan Tanner spoke with remarkable clarity. Nathan Tanner, stop talking nonsense. Sophia Lewis's face flushed red. She secretly glanced at Ethan Tanner, only to unexpectedly meet his gaze, causing her to quickly look away. Her small, fair face flushed pink, and her long, thick eyelashes quivered slightly with tension. This embarrassed demeanor was exactly the same as that night when she lay beneath him. For some reason, just thinking about that scene made Ethan Tanner feel a sudden heat in his lower body. A surge of emotions welled up, causing his wound to throb painfully. Unable to hold back, he gave a few light coughs. Unexpectedly, this unintentional cough was taken by everyone as a sign that he was about to speak, and all eyes turned toward him. Dad, say something. Nathan Tanner looked at Ethan Tanner with anticipation. If she wants to stay, she'll stay. Talking more is useless. This cold remark extinguished the glimmer of hope that had just sparked in Sophia Lewis's heart. Nathan Tanner was truly furious, thinking, how could his father be so oblivious? The atmosphere grew chilly once more, to the point that when the phone rang, Oliver Grant quickly left the hospital room as if fleeing. His boss was so hard to please, Oliver feared he might not be able to resist spilling everything the third young master had done. Answering the call, Oliver Grant's expression gradually turned serious. Sigh, I'm really at a loss with you three. Hannah Carter rubbed her temples and sighed. Let me be direct, President Tanner. I want to take Sophia away because I'm concerned for her safety. I think you understand what I mean, right? What, are you afraid I'll harm her? Ethan Tanner finally turned to look at Hannah Carter, his cold gaze sending shivers down her spine. Isn't it obvious? Despite her inner fear, Hannah Carter firmly faced Ethan Tanner. Then explain this, Sophia is staying with the Tanner family, so how did she end up kidnapped? She was kidnapped. Ethan Tanner seemed a bit surprised upon hearing this. Third young master. As soon as the words left his mouth, Oliver Grant pushed the door open and entered with a solemn expression. He handed the phone to Ethan Tanner and leaned down to whisper a few words in his ear. Ethan Tanner's face, which had just softened, turned icy again. Sophia Lewis, I think you owe us an explanation. Oliver Grant immediately handed the phone to Sophia Lewis, his eyes filled with regret. On the phone screen was surveillance footage showing her staggering as she left the Tanner family's villa. Sophia Lewis was completely dumbfounded. How could this be possible? Equally stunned, of course, was Hannah Carter. Sophia, what exactly happened? Hannah Carter asked softly, didn't you say you woke up and found yourself in a hotel? I really don't know. Sophia Lewis looked bewildered. Hannah, you have to believe me. Even if I believe you, what good does it do? The key is that he has to believe you. Hannah Carter anxiously signaled her with a glance. To be falsely accused so inexplicably, who wouldn't be angry? Especially someone like that cold-faced king of hell. You can check the surveillance cameras in other places. Sophia Lewis was so flustered her face turned red, nearly stomping her feet. I really don't know what happened. Miss Lewis, I'm sorry, but there are no surveillance cameras installed inside the villa. These images are all we've been able to retrieve, Oliver Grant said with a slight shake of his head. There was, however, one more piece of surveillance footage he hadn't shown Ethan Tanner. It was a clip of Sophia Lewis walking to the roadside and getting straight into an unlicensed black car, as if it had all been prearranged. Ethan Tanner had just woken up, and Oliver Grant didn't dare expose him to anything too upsetting. No surveillance cameras? Hearing this, Sophia Lewis immediately flared up. A place this massive, and you're telling me there are no surveillance cameras? Oliver Grant, are you joking with me? Her sudden surge of confidence left everyone stunned. Oliver Grant, the one she directed her anger at, stood frozen, looking a bit awkward, while Hannah Carter seemed quietly impressed. Little Meng Tai was even more delighted, clenching her fists in secret and whispering, yes. Her mother, who had always been the one bullied, was finally showing signs of standing up for herself. As for Ethan Tanner, a fleeting trace of inexplicable tenderness crossed his eyes. Seeing everyone's expressions, Sophia Lewis suddenly realized she had misspoken and quickly retreated into shyness. Oliver Grant, I didn't mean it that way. Miss Lewis, it's fine, no need to apologize. Not only was there no need to apologize, but Oliver Grant was nearly moved to tears. This was the true heiress of the Lewis family in his heart. The residential area of the Tanner family's villa truly has no surveillance cameras, they were all removed 2 years ago. Even the electric grid installed outside the walls. That's why the third young master dug a river outside to raise man-eating fish. Oliver Grant patiently explained. Chapter 13, Drugged. Sophia Lewis was stunned. Oliver Grant didn't say anything, but she had truly forgotten. Her impression of this villa was that it was a completely desolate place. Apart from the iron fence and the iron bars, she had once complained that living here was no different from being in prison. No wonder she always felt something was off. But Ethan Tanner wasn't known for being someone who changed easily, was he? Why had he suddenly done so now? Oliver Grant. Ethan Tanner suddenly spoke, his face cold and emotionless. Take her blood for testing. Oliver Grant seemed to understand immediately, nodded, and quickly went to find a doctor. "Why on earth do you need to test my blood?" Sophia Lewis pouted, muttering under her breath. "Oh my goodness, my dear lady, could you speak up a little louder?" Hannah Carter exclaimed, clearly exasperated. It was like the Emperor wasn't anxious, but the eunuch was. Seeing Sophia's fighting spirit dimming, Hannah wished she could pour 2 barrels of gasoline to ignite it again. Nathan Tanner nodded repeatedly, feeling helpless about his mother's behavior. "Come on, Mom. You can't back down. Otherwise, your position in the family might waver in the future." Seeing Sophia Lewis revert to her usual demeanor, Ethan Tanner suddenly felt irritated. He closed his eyes and turned his face away. "Mom, Dad must be asking for the blood test because he's worried about you." Nathan Tanner stepped in, his clear and innocent childlike voice breaking the stalemate between his parents. "When I was little and got sick, didn't you also take me to the hospital for a blood test? Dad must think there's something wrong with you. When you were little." Hearing this, Hannah Carter burst out laughing. "Nathan Tanner, you're so young, and you dare to claim you were little before. What's wrong with that?" Nathan Tanner tilted his head, calmly retorting, "Isn't little or big relative? When I say, when I was little, I mean smaller than I am now, not compared to adults." Flawless logic. Hannah Carter was left speechless. Indeed, blood relations are reliable. No need for long explanations, the boy's single sentence clarified his intent. Ethan Tanner was very satisfied. However, being accustomed to his cold demeanor, he didn't show it outwardly. Before long, Oliver Grant brought in the doctor. The doctor quickly drew a vial of blood from Sophia Lewis's vein, said nothing, and hurriedly left. Sophia Lewis felt uneasy. She couldn't figure out what Ethan Tanner was planning. "Mom, don't worry. Dad won't hurt you." Nathan Tanner nestled against Sophia Lewis's side, his soft and sweet voice melting hearts. Hannah Carter was about to lose her mind. How could such an adorable child exist in this world? So understanding, so thoughtful, and on top of that, so cute. He was so endearing that she felt like grabbing some handsome guy to make a baby herself. Just 5 minutes later, Oliver Grant returned with a report in hand. "Third young master, there are indeed traces of XR7 in Miss Lewis's blood." Oliver Grant solemnly handed the report to Ethan Tanner. His admiration for his boss had already surpassed the limits of mere respect, his instincts were truly sharp. No wonder CG Corporation had never suffered a loss in the investment market. XR7. What the heck is that? Hannah Carter asked loudly. Should have figured it out by now, right? Oliver Grant shot her a sidelong glance. It's an upgraded version of obedience water. It allows the victim to act freely but makes their mind completely submissive to orders. That powerful? Hannah Carter's eyes widened. Miss Carter, aren't you supposed to be the queen of nightclubs? What, you don't even know about this stuff? Oliver Grant sneered coldly. Finally, a chance to regain some dignity. Humph. I've been retired from that scene for ages. Hannah Carter pouted. Meanwhile, Sophia Lewis stood beside her, her mind a tangled mess. The charge of leaving the villa without permission was cleared, but, who would want to poison her? Oliver Grant, find out who's behind this. Ethan Tanner tightened his grip on the edge of the report, a dangerous glint flashing in his cold, dark eyes. The culprit had acted while Sophia Lewis was unconscious, it had to be someone from the Tanner family. He hadn't expected the fire to start right in his own backyard. Once he caught the perpetrator, he would show no mercy. Yes, sir. Oliver Grant nodded firmly. Actually, without Ethan Tanner's orders, he already knew what needed to be done. This type of anesthetic was extremely rare on the market, not something an ordinary person could easily acquire. It seemed that only by investigating personally could one uncover just how deep this water ran. "Hannah Carter, I think you should leave," Ethan Tanner said coldly. His icy tone sent shivers down Hannah Carter's spine, but she still tried to ask, "Then what about Sophia and Nathan Tanner?" Before Ethan Tanner could respond, Nathan Tanner stepped in. "Aunt Hannah, don't worry about me and Mommy." Nathan Tanner grabbed Hannah Carter's hand gallantly, leading her to the door. "With me protecting Mommy, no one would dare harm her." After saying this, Nathan Tanner raised his eyebrows, his radiant smile blooming like fireworks, so dazzling it was hard to look directly at him. Coupled with his perfectly tailored British-style suit, the young boy truly looked like a miniature version of a prince on a white horse, making Hannah Carter's heart swell with affection. "All right, whatever you say," Hannah Carter smiled foolishly, letting Nathan Tanner lead her out of the hospital room. "Well then, see you later, Auntie." Nathan Tanner waved at Hannah Carter with a bright smile before slamming the door shut with a loud bang and quickly locking it. "Huh." Hannah Carter finally snapped out of her daze, stomped her foot helplessly, and turned to leave. Now, at last, it was just the three of them, family. Nathan Tanner skipped over to Ethan Tanner, proudly tilting his small face up. "Dad, how did I do? Wasn't I great?" His adorable, smug expression was irresistible, making Ethan Tanner suppress the sharp pain from his wound and gently pat Nathan Tanner's head. The moment he touched him, it was as if his soul was electrified, a strange and unprecedented feeling washing over him. Could this be fatherly love? Ethan Tanner was slightly taken aback. Huff. Ethan Tanner was so immersed in that feeling that he forgot about the wounds on his body. "Are you okay?" Sophia Lewis asked worriedly. If she had been injured as severely as this, she would have been lying flat on the bed pretending to be dead long ago. Seeing Ethan Tanner's complexion, which had just improved, turn pale again, her heart ached like being pricked by needles. "Water." Ethan Tanner casually responded, pulling his hand back. "Oh, okay." Sophia Lewis nodded and quickly went to the cabinet to fetch a kettle and a cup. Perhaps due to nervousness, while pouring the water, she accidentally spilled hot water on her hand. The burning sensation spread, and Sophia Lewis instinctively let go. Crash! The cup fell to the ground. "Mom!" Nathan Tanner reacted quickly, grabbing her wrist. "What happened to your hand?" There were several cuts of varying depths on her palms, some of which had already scabbed over. Nathan Tanner, "Mom's fine, it's just a little accident." Sophia Lewis forced a smile. She didn't dare tell her son that these wounds were caused by worrying about both father and son. Chapter 14, How many men have you served? We need to see a doctor. Such beautiful hands of yours, Mom, it'd be such a pity if they scar. Nathan Tanner frowned, his chubby little face showing concern. Sophia Lewis's heart felt like it was melting. Over the past few years, she had endured so much hardship, sometimes feeling as though she couldn't bear it anymore. Her son had always been the guiding light, illuminating her path through the thorny road of life. Sophia Lewis's expression, a mix of sadness and grievance, made Ethan Tanner glance at her, feeling an inexplicable itch in his heart. "Ah, right, water." Sophia Lewis suddenly remembered and quickly poured a glass of warm water. After ensuring the temperature was just right, she carefully brought it to Ethan Tanner. Seeing the glass stop about 3 centimeters away from him, Ethan Tanner frowned in displeasure. "Is this what you call a high-class caregiver?" His tone was full of disdain, so obvious that even a fool could hear it. Is there something wrong?" Sophia Lewis asked, bewildered. "Mom, you have to feed Dad." Nathan Tanner couldn't help but cover his forehead. He had confidently assured his father about Sophia Lewis's caregiving skills, hoping his mom wouldn't embarrass him. "Oh, all right." Sophia Lewis, startled like a frightened rabbit, trembled as she brought the glass to Ethan Tanner's lips. Ethan Tanner couldn't stand the woman before him any longer. He grabbed the glass with his mouth and drank it all himself. "Dad, do you need to go to the bathroom?" "Mom's very strong, she can help you in there." Nathan Tanner tilted his head, blinking his phoenix-shaped eyes at Ethan Tanner, wishing he could showcase all of Sophia Lewis's talents. "Are you seriously planning to help someone go to the bathroom?" Ethan Tanner looked visibly annoyed. Of course. That's part of being a caregiver, you have to do everything." Sophia Lewis blurted out. Her words only made Ethan Tanner more irritated. An image of her undressing another man involuntarily popped into his mind, making his chest tighten uncomfortably. "Dad, don't worry. Mom only takes care of elderly grandpas and grandmas." Nathan Tanner, as if reading Ethan Tanner's thoughts, quickly added. "Humph, why would I be worried?" Ethan Tanner averted his eyes. "If no one mentions it, it's fine, but as soon as it's brought up, the tension in the lower abdomen becomes noticeable." "Sophia Lewis, help me up." "Huh? Oh." Although her reaction was slightly delayed, luckily, she managed to respond to the Great Demon King's request before he got angry. Without hesitation, she reached out to support Ethan Tanner's arm. But even such a light touch made Ethan Tanner's face turn pale. "Sophia Lewis, don't you know my arm is injured?" He held his breath, trying to stay calm, while casting a disdainful glance at his son. "Is this what you call your trump card?" "Humph," Nathan Tanner furrowed his brows, he truly couldn't understand. His mother was obviously skilled at taking care of others, so why did it seem like she malfunctioned when dealing with his father? Everything seemed wrong. "Mom, you can do it." Nathan Tanner silently cheered for Sophia Lewis. Sophia Lewis had no idea about the exchange of glances between father and son. Ethan Tanner's earlier words had scared her out of her wits. "Yes, I'm sorry." She fumbled nervously, looking at Ethan Tanner, who was wrapped in bandages, unsure of what to do. "Don't move." Ethan Tanner snapped, his voice laced with disdain. Following his command, Sophia Lewis immediately froze. Ethan Tanner struggled to stand, wrapping an arm around Sophia Lewis's neck, creating a half-embrace posture. The faint fragrance unique to women lingered near his nose, just a slight tilt of his head, and he could see her earlobe, blushing like a piece of jade. The tension in his abdomen remained, but now it carried a different meaning. At this moment, Sophia Lewis stopped overthinking. With Ethan Tanner leaning on her, she was pulled back to reality and began focusing on taking care of him as a patient. "Come on, take it slow." Sophia Lewis gently helped him toward the bathroom, her tone unconsciously soft. That tender, sweet voice caused Ethan Tanner's heart to flutter slightly, and without realizing it, he tightened his grip on her arm. After successfully helping Ethan Tanner into the bathroom, Sophia Lewis skillfully lifted the toilet lid, then closed her eyes as she helped him pull down his pants. Afterward, she stepped out of the bathroom and shut the door behind her. "Call me when you're done." A series of movements flowed as smoothly as water in clouds, extremely skillful. However, Sophia Lewis's calm demeanor only made Ethan Tanner more uneasy. How many men had she served to become this proficient? After helping him take care of his personal needs, Sophia Lewis assisted him back to the bed. He lowered his head to look at the girl who was attentively focused, and the suffocating feeling in his chest grew even heavier than before. "Mom, I'm hungry." Nathan Tanner softly tugged at the corner of Sophia Lewis's shirt. "Wait a moment, sweetheart." Sophia Lewis held Nathan Tanner's hand and walked with him into the kitchen. This was the presidential suite of the hotel, where nearly everything was readily available, including a 3-door refrigerator stocked with fresh ingredients. Since Ethan Tanner was ill and shouldn't eat anything too hard, Sophia Lewis chose green vegetables, shiitake mushrooms, and fresh shrimp to cook porridge, then used other ingredients to prepare a few small side dishes. After feeding Nathan Tanner, Sophia Lewis served Ethan Tanner a bowl of shrimp porridge. Once both father and son had eaten their fill, she finally ate the leftovers herself. Just as she finished tidying up, Oliver Grant stepped in, as if perfectly on cue. "Miss Lewis, the doctor mentioned some positive signs from Madam. Would you like to take the little one to visit her?" He smiled and said, "She's in the room next door." "Really?" Sophia Lewis was overjoyed and immediately grabbed her son's hand, rushing out of the hospital room. As their figures disappeared down the hallway, the smile on Oliver Grant's face gradually faded. "How's the investigation coming along?" Ethan Tanner asked coldly. "Everyone working in the private estate has been interrogated individually, but so far, no leads have surfaced," Oliver Grant reported while handing over the collected documents to Ethan Tanner. "The unregistered car spotted on the surveillance cameras has been located, abandoned by the highway. Currently, all we know is that the driver was a man in his early 20s. "And then?" Ethan Tanner frowned. "That's all. However, third young master, all the information about Mrs. Lewis's activities over the past 4 years is included here." Oliver Grant quickly flipped to the following pages. The case of Sophia Lewis being drugged and kidnapped was even more complicated than he had anticipated. He hadn't expected to find no clues whatsoever at the private estate. But at the airport, he managed to gather some useful information. The kidnappers seemed to have connections to the Tanner family. Of course, before having concrete evidence, everything was merely speculation, and Ethan Tanner despised anything considered speculation the most. Thus, Oliver Grant decided to temporarily keep this matter under wraps. Before presenting his report, he had thought of using Sophia Lewis's situation to divert Ethan Tanner's attention. As expected, this tactic worked exceptionally well. Chapter 15, Sleeping on the Floor. "Tell me, what exactly did she do?" Staring at the tiny, densely packed text that gave him a splitting headache, Ethan Tanner decisively closed his eyes. The Lewis Corporation went bankrupt in just 4 days. Miss Lewis took $5 million in savings and, along with her mother, Mrs. Young, moved to Northport. That same year, Mrs. Young was in a traffic accident and became comatose. Miss Lewis also gave birth to a son that year. Trusting others too easily, she was swindled out of all her assets. When her son was 6 months old, Miss Lewis began doing all kinds of work to make a living. According to incomplete statistics, she worked as a housekeeper, caregiver, dishwasher, food delivery person, and more. Oliver Grant rattled off a long list, nearly running out of breath. Sophia Lewis had done so many jobs that it was impossible to list them all. He only mentioned the most common ones. Jobs like dog walking or pretending to be someone's girlfriend during the holidays, he didn't dare include those. Caregiver. Who did she take care of? Ethan Tanner's face darkened as he asked with evident displeasure. Oliver Grant quickly flipped through the documents. Mainly patients in the geriatric ward and the intensive care unit. Mostly men. Hearing this, Oliver Grant was momentarily stunned. The patient turnover rate in hospitals was so high, especially in the intensive care unit, how could anyone investigate such details thoroughly? Find out the names and ages of every single patient she ever cared for. Yes. Oliver Grant felt like crying but had no tears to shed. This job was truly draining him. Thankfully, the matter of pretending to be a girlfriend hadn't been exposed yet. Otherwise, the tasks awaiting him would only increase, not decrease. When did she and Michael Gray meet? The moment this name was mentioned, Ethan Tanner's expression darkened, and his tone turned colder. At that time, Mrs. Lewis couldn't afford the medical expenses, so she transferred Mrs. Young to a nursing home in Northport. Coincidentally, Michael Gray was in charge of the conglomerate's nursing home project. He visited the site for inspection last March, probably then. Oliver Grant chose his words carefully, fearing that one wrong word might provoke Ethan Tanner's anger. The CG conglomerate's nursing home system was merely a public relations project, handed over entirely to Michael Gray. Who would have thought he'd exploit a loophole in this project? Reassign the West African Railway project to Michael Gray. Huh. Oliver Grant was momentarily stunned. But before he could finish, a cold glint flashed in Ethan Tanner's eyes, prompting him to instinctively shut his mouth. Changing the project lead midway would cost tens of millions in breach of contract fees. It seemed the third young master was determined to bring down this scoundrel. Oh, by the way, third young master, the rooms for Mrs. Lewis and the young master have been prepared, right across from your ward. Oliver Grant hurriedly changed the subject. Who told you to prepare rooms for them? Another icy glare followed. Oliver Grant stammered, then where should they? Nathan Tanner will sleep in the small room. As for Sophia Lewis. Ethan Tanner hesitated. She'll sleep on the floor. Oliver Grant. It was well known that his boss couldn't tolerate being disturbed while sleeping. For years, he had maintained a strict rule of no living beings within a 20-meter radius at night. And yet, the power of love was truly extraordinary. Of course, Oliver Grant claiming that Margaret Young was feeling better was merely an excuse to get Sophia Lewis and her son to leave. He had even instructed the attending physician to lie a little to smooth things over. However, he didn't anticipate the doctor's clumsy response, which Nathan Tanner quickly caught onto. Just a few probing questions from Nathan were enough to expose the deceit, revealing Oliver Grant as the mastermind and leaving Sophia Lewis disappointed.